You need somebody else to challenge you. You need somebody to tell you you're being an idiot when you're being an idiot. And somebody that you can call up and just say, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's the situation. Help me walk through it. And sometimes just that conversation, know your tools well. And so that's what we encourage with our practitioners. We ask for feedback from the members. I want them to challenge us. I want them to say, hey, look at this. Did you think about that?
How have you seen optometry change over the last 10, 15, 20 years?
It's gone through a huge change, like I think everything else has in our worlds. For one, the scope of what optometrists can do and what they're able to do and what they're trained to do has expanded. Mm-hmm. But with that expansion, we haven't lost responsibilities.
Hello, and welcome back to Ali Off the Record. I'm your host, Ali Urumcan, and today we're diving into the future of optometry with someone who not only runs a successful private practice, but he also plays a key leadership role in shaping the profession on a national scale. Joining me is Dr. Aaron Werner, a fifth-generation optometrist and partner at Werner Optometry in San Diego. And he's also the Senior Director of Learning and Development for Vision Source. Now, Aaron brings a very unique perspective. He's not only grown up in an optometry family, but he owns his own practice and now mentors thousands of doctors through Vision Source to become, optometric entrepreneurs. In this episode, we're going to explore the biggest threats facing optometry today, what the future of the profession looks like, and then some practical tips for young optometrists who want to become practice owners. So stay tuned. This is a conversation every optometrist is going to want to hear. Welcome back, everyone. Aaron, so great to see you here. You're looking as good as everybody.
I don't know if that's saying much, but thank you.
Yeah. Well, that
the
San
bar's
Diego
not high on
sun
that one.
That San Diego sun is sitting well,
I appreciate it. You're looking good too. I like that neon sign behind you.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah, that's sharp.
It works. It worked out well. This was our interior designer came up with that out of the blue when I was telling her I want to make this space that I'm in right now into a podcasting area, and she came up with it like on the fly, and I was like, neon, but it does look good. It does look good. So
I like it.
Thanks, buddy. So Aaron, you and I have known each other for probably 15 years now, and you're a fifth-generation optometrist, which is pretty incredible to think about, when you really put that into perspective. And I wanted you to come on and give us kind of your perspective on optometry and what's worked out and what hasn't worked out and where you think it's going. But in terms of your family's legacy in optometry, like tell us a little bit about that. Like, is that what got you into optometry? To continue that, was your love for it? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the short answer is absolutely not. I did everything I could not to follow the family legacy and go into optometry.
Oh, that's funny.
I grew up in the back of my grandpa's office, just stacking the boxes back that you get back from the lab and knocking them over like any little kid does.
Yeah.
Being told to be quiet. And then my dad went to optometry school. I was in third or fourth grade when he graduated, so I was the dummy that his classmates practiced on.
Yeah.
And then he opened up cold in San Diego when I was in fourth grade. So I don't think there were child labor laws in California then.
No.
If there were, we certainly were not following them because I did every aspect from edging the lenses in the back and making them to dyeing the lenses when we used to have to dye them by hand with the tints, all the way through working in the practice. So when I went to undergrad at San Diego State, my intention was to do something in the sciences, but not follow in his footsteps. And I like to say that he grew up because I never did. I was always the mature young man that I am now. And but I looked and said, hey, this is a pretty good life. You get a good sense of business. You get a good sense of science. You get to work with people and help people. And it gives a really good work-life balance, good family life balance. And so it pulled me back in as much as I tried to escape.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. And you went to San Diego State when it was not a party school, so I feel bad for you because right now it is like the number one party school in the country, and
I
it's
missed
like
it.
it's hard. It's harder to get into San Diego State today than it is some of the UCs, which is phenomenal to think about, right? Like
Yeah,
it
that's
is
crazy.
just incredible, and it's all about social media, man. It's like these kids. My daughter, who's a second year now, she when she was applying for colleges, she would show us these Instagrams of like these kids in like southern schools like Alabama, like all the SEC schools and
Yep.
San Diego State, and they're like all having like just a blast. And she's like, I want to go there. I'm like, yeah, a Persian in Alabama. I'm not sure about that.
Ah, that's funny. Yeah, no, I applied on the last day you could apply, and I looked at UCSD and San Diego State, and UCSD's finals were an hour longer than San Diego State's finals, and so I
Oh my
chose
gosh.
to go to San Diego State because I didn't want to be in class that long.
Oh my God, that's such an Aaron Werner thing to do. Okay, all right. So your dad started Cold in San Diego. Is it the same location you're in now?
It's in the same shopping center. So he was
Same-
in a small suite. We moved a couple doors down and expanded. And it's kind of fun because now my son is our lead technician in the practice. So we're on to the third generation of Werner there. And it's pretty neat to see him take pride in the name on the door.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a doctor in the practice. Just his name on the door and how he feels towards the practice. He has no ownership, but it's much more engaging for him, which is kind of cool.
It is very cool, very cool. And, having worked with a lot of doctors who have taken over their parents' practices, I have a special appreciation for it because on the surface, it actually seems like it would be easy, right? You come in, you just take over mommy and daddy's office, and, people have that belief, but in reality, at least from my perspective, it's actually not easy at all. There's a certain hurdle that you have to overcome with the patients, with the staff, and the rest of the team and others that is much more difficult than if you were buying someone else's practice and just walking through those doors. What was your experience like in that way?
So I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I was immensely lucky to have my dad who prepped patients coming in. He talked about how excited he was to have me come on, but he was also very clear with me that I had to cut my own teeth and I had to earn the respect myself, that the namesake would only go so far. And for him, it actually was a high barrier to achieve because he had made such a name for himself in the community that I couldn't just be good. I had to be great like he was. And there were plenty of times that we had discussions and very clear discussions. And again, to his credit, I think he was, made it unemotional and made it just, very transparent on what the expectations were. And it gave us room to agree and disagree and challenge each other behind the scenes. But going forward, we had to be a unified front. I will say at the time when I bought in, Mom was working and we had to find a new opportunity for her because that was just too much family all in one spot. And
You fired your mom? You
no,
fired your mom?
I
What?
found another opportunity for my
Oh
mom.
my gosh, dude. You are definitely not getting any Christmas gifts or, birthday gifts anymore. I can't believe you did that. Wow. Wow. No,
But I was the only kid that stayed with the grandkids locally. So I mean,
Yeah, okay,
right?
all right.
I got a little bit of a wins.
Well,
and
I don't remember how long ago it was now. When did you buy in? Because I helped you.
10 years.
10 years. Wow. Okay. So I remember that transaction because it was a few years after you and I had really gotten to know each other and worked together, on different things with Vision Source and other situations. And I remember exactly what you just described, which was your dad tried to keep this as arm's length as possible, right? You did get a, hometown discount, but,
Yep.
it was, he made you at least from what I saw, earn it, right? Like you had to pay for it. You had to do what you had to do. And you know, I think that's something that people sometimes forget, because it's not always just handed down. It's, you know, you got to go through this process. So.
Yep. Through the process. And then, you know, because I've acquired other practices and we merged them in, so I've gone through, you know, different sales things. On those, when I left the office, I could leave the office. Okay. Here, when I left the office, right, I saw them on the weekends. We saw, Thanksgivings and family dinners and stuff. And so there was a whole different element that I think can be beneficial, but it can also be very challenging. Yeah. You know, and then families and siblings and all the other, how you structure those relationships within the practice, because it's one thing when it's your dad's, it's different when it's your brother's.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about your journey, what you've seen. So not not from the time you were helping your grandpa, but from the time you have graduated school, and maybe even before when you were working in your dad's practice. But how have you seen optometry change over the last 10, 15, 20 years?
Oh, it's gone through a huge change, like I think everything else has in our worlds. For one, the scope of what optometrists can do and what they're able to do and what they're trained to do has expanded. Mm-hmm. But with that expansion, we haven't lost responsibilities as well, and so there's more responsibilities now put on the practitioner. Technology has exploded, but that also is a challenge on how you incorporate those technologies. I think the patients have changed in a sense of what we want. There's a different desire for, or different definition for value, just in ourselves, in my employees, in my patients. And so I think that for me, that's part of the journey and the fun is trying to stay just one step ahead of the changes that are coming. I think if you live in the good old world of how things were, then that's part of the frustration that I see with people, is that they remember the good old days because we're really good about forgetting what was not good during that time.
Right.
But there's just a lot more responsibility, I feel like, because we can see more, we can do more, but that means I'm also responsible for more with each of the patients.
Yeah. There's there's a lot of doctors who we work with who are finishing up school. They're coming out, and their mindset, even though they want to be entrepreneurs, they know that to get to financial independence, a lot of them have to, own their own practices and things of that nature. But they also see, optometry, in sort of a unique vision, in a unique way, because it's one of the few parts of healthcare where you have a lot of non-healthcare entities in that business, right? And, between like a Warby Parker, Costco, Walmart, you name it, right? They're in the business of optometry, even though they're not doing the medical, they're doing the optical side, but they're in the business. And that sometimes scares these younger doctors. So Aaron, from your perspective, what have you done, or what can you share to this younger generation, that what should they be thinking about as they kind of overcome those fears?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. I think that every sword has two edges, right? You can't possibly have a positive without having a negative.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I see that as a good thing, right? Roller coasters go up before they go down.
Right.
And so the wonderful opportunity optometry has in having a retail and being able to deliver on the recommendations and the prescriptions that we prescribe, and buy glasses and contacts and whatnot. And quite frankly, that's generally about 50% of a practice's revenue. Mm-hmm. So it's a wonderful revenue stream.
Right.
The downside is others get to play in that game as well.
Right.
And what I remind myself, my team, my colleagues, is that we get a cheating advantage compared to those other entities because we have the patients first.
Right.
And so what I would tell these folks is like, look, anytime you're in a game, you get to play to win. And there's rules to the game, and the rules are constantly changing. But by owning the practice and being in the practice, you get first dibs on the patient. You have that first touch point, and they really get to fight over what's left over and the scraps that are left over. So if you do a really good kick-ass job in the business of giving the experience that your patients are looking for, they're now fighting over your scraps.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting perspective. And as you were saying that, I was just thinking about my daughter's experience. My oldest, who is 19, but she it feels like she's like 35. Sometimes she had an experience where she went to her optometrist, and we had gotten frames from them all the time. But I remember this experience where she felt like the optician wasn't communicating with her. She was just talking to my wife, right? And she was like a young young adult, right? Like she's a teenager, but she can make her own decisions. And that interaction was enough for her to not feel all warm and fuzzy about all the frames that they had, and they had a lot. I mean, it was not like a small, office, and so she could have picked any one of those, and she ended up looking around, and I forget where she ended up getting it, but I think to your point, it's like that first line of defense, right? Yep. What is that experience you have, and can you maintain that patient with the experience that you're providing?
Oh, absolutely. We're in an experience economy. At the end of the day, almost everything that gets put out is really good. So we get to compete on experience. Yeah. And I think that's a fun place to be because experiences are fun. Yeah. Right? Every transactional gets boring, but experiences are fun.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So you so you bring a sort of a really unique perspective on this, and in the sense that you've got your private practice experience, of course. It's a family practice on top of that, and then you've got this sort of national role as well with Vision Source, which we'll talk about Vision Source a little bit later. But you've got sort of a national role there as a senior director of learning and development and whatnot, and you work with a lot of the leaders over at Vision Source in terms of the franchises and whatnot. But what do you see right now as the biggest threat to optometry?
The biggest threat to optometry as a profession is, I think, the same threat that we see across the board, and it's just an apathy of wanting to fully understand the optometries that we have. It's really easy to say, hey, bad things are happening to me and I don't understand. Yeah. Optometry is probably the single most complicated and complex role within healthcare, at least from an insurance standpoint, because at any visit you could have multiple different third-party payers and the patient paying for a visit. Sure. So you can get in the weeds, and often it feels like things are happening to us, right? The government makes a new rule and it's happening to us. The HIPAA makes a new rule and something bad's happening to us. Where if you flip the script and say, hey, just the rules of the game are changing like they do every year in Major League Baseball and NFL and whatnot, right? I still hate the kickoff rule in football, but but once the rules change, as long as you can adjust to those, you can play the game to win. And so I think that the threat to all healthcare is an apathy about saying I don't want to keep learning all the new rules, but I also think that's a competitive advantage to those who say, hey, I'm game. Let's keep playing. Let's keep adjusting, and by staying in front of it, I can take advantage of it.
And so, how does one stay ahead of it, right? Like how do you take advantage of it? Like how can you be more proactive about these changes? Because you're not just talking about like the federal rules. You're talking about insurance rules. You're talking about everything kind of coming at it. So how does a young doctor who just bought a practice or is just opening up and wants to always be at the forefront, how do they do it? Like, how would you recommend?
I think that I'm the head. I mean, I'm the president and CEO of Werner Optometry, but that doesn't mean I do everything. It just means that I am responsible for building the right team to do it. Right. I don't need to stay atop of tax laws because I work with Jackson, whose job is to stay on top of the tax stuff. I work with HR for Health, so I don't have to worry about the changing HR laws. They do it for me. I just have to make sure that when they give me the updates, I stay on top of it. Then I work with compliance groups like PCS who reads up on the new compliance rules and stays on top of me. I think it's important that I've got to do my homework too. I have to read my insurance and provider contracts so I know what I'm agreeing to do. And then I think understanding that we're in an experience economy, I've mentioned it a bunch, right? Just listen to some podcasts, listen to some audiobooks, stay on top of what that is. When you go shopping to the mall with my 19-year-old, I'm not just looking on how much I got to put on the credit card, but I'm looking at the experience that they're giving us, and how could I take that back to my practice and duplicate it?
Yeah.
So always trying to learn, always trying to be hungry.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, you're right. It's learning from other industries and how to bring that into optometry is, I think, something that sometimes we forget. We focus so much on what's happening inside, optometry and healthcare, or, but you don't look outside, but there's a lot of things outside that the best, practices, if you will, that you can bring into your own practice. So,
absolutely. I've got a little notes app on my phone that whenever I go, even my dentist when I was just there for a cleaning. Yeah. And as soon as I get to the car, I write down a couple of things that I liked or didn't like from that experience, and I can always tap back into it.
Yeah. I love that. So now when optometrists is coming out of school, right, we're seeing, a lot of these MSOs, these, large private equity backed, medical enterprises, convincing them to come work for them, right? And of course, they're private equity backed. They're not doing it for charity, right? I mean, the money is there for them to be made, and they don't necessarily. I don't think they're necessarily focused on the growth of the optometrist as an individual, right? But it doesn't mean that it's a bad place to start working, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's one of the best places to start working, and I'm going to get some daggers from my friends on this and colleagues. I think that as a professional, it's our job to take responsibility for our own professional development. Certainly, you want people helping you and supporting you, but you've got to grab the bull by the horns and be the one riding. I think that there's not a single entity or place that we can work where we don't learn something. And maybe it's learning what I don't want to do when I go out, but you learn something for it. There's value in efficiencies. There's value in going quickly. There's value in having somebody on top of you saying, hey, it's about the money, because at the end of the day, I can't pay my staff and my rent and my bills without money. Right. So I'm not a nonprofit, and most aren't. And so there's value that you can take and learn from each of those. And I'll share one of the best things my dad ever told me when I graduated optometry school. He shook my hand. Here I am with the cap and gown, and he said, "Congratulations! In 5 years you'll be a doctor." Yeah. And at the time I said, "You're kind of a dick, right?" Like just on my graduation day, 5 years later, I realized what he meant. Yeah. And now it's time to go out in the real world and experience and make the mistakes, make the challenges, learn from those, learn from everything. So if anything, if I look back on my whole career, I wish I would have had a chance to be and work in a place like that just drives from top down. I'm very self-motivated, but that was one experience I didn't get, and I see both staff and doctors come from those locations that bring a skill set an experience I didn't have. Yeah. No, I think that's a really great point, because when we do our seminars for the third and fourth years, we actually talk about almost exactly what you just said. So I'm glad you brought it up, which is, you want to get different experiences so you know what you like and what you don't like. And it's not always just about the business, right? It's also about the process, right? The patient base, the model, right? The softwares they use, the frame lines that they have, like it's all those things, because we have some doctors who will contact us. They've been in a sublease for 7-8 years, and they now want to do their own office, but they kind of jumped into it, not really realizing what it was all about, and then they felt they were stuck. Right. Yep. And so, and some are, have continued working with others as associates for a long, long time. And then suddenly they wake up one day and they've been doing it for 15, 20 years. And they go, oh my gosh, like I need to, I haven't saved enough. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. So now they want to own their own office. And so I think working in a couple of different places teaches you a lot of that. And then you can make a decision. But I will tell the audience this, because man, we get so many of these, Aaron, and I'm sure you do too. We get so many doctors who sign employment contracts working for these large private equity groups or, these other practices, and they never read their contracts. And so, and if you're in a state like California, there are certain laws like non-competition, that's totally unlawful. But there's like a lot of states in our union where non-competition laws are legal as long as they're reasonable. So if you go work somewhere
in your hometown that you signed a contract and you haven't read, you might be stuck. You know what I mean? You might be stuck and you have to go now outside of that, radius to work. And so you got to read the contracts. I mean, please.
100%.
Yeah.
Read all your contracts. It just learn the rules of the game. And I'm not a Lakers fan, but I love Kobe. And one of my favorite Kobe interviews was when he talked about reading the referee's handbook. So he knew where they had to stand. And he knew.
Oh, how funny.
Right. He knew where they had to stand so he can get away with stuff he needed to get away with it.
Yeah.
But he knew their role better than they knew their role. And when you know the rules of the game, you can play the game to win.
Yeah.
When you don't know the rules of the game plays you.
Yeah. I love that, actually. I hadn't heard that about Kobe. That's cool.
Oh,
Was that an interview?
Yeah, I'll find the interview and send it to you. It's a great interview.
Cool. That's cool. That's so like him to do that, right? It's so Michael Jordan-esque, like always being like a step ahead, So
when you're a student of the game, you're a student of your profession. That's professionalism to me.
That's professionals. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, not to kind of veer off into this angle, but I saw an interview with Dennis Rodman, and it was actually Michael Jordan talking about Dennis, and he was like, "Look, he was a crazy, eccentric guy. He was, he needed his mental breaks when mental breaks were not a common thing, like all of that stuff." He's like, but he was one of the smartest players, and he would study the tendencies of the other team's best players, so he would know where to stand to get the rebounds, right? So it wasn't by luck. And so they were kind of talking about that side of it, where when you think about Dennis Rodman, you think about the tattoos and going to North Korea and, taking a day off in the middle of the NBA finals, like all that kind of crazy stuff. You don't think about, all this other, strategic stuff that people are, that he was doing. So anyways. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about delays in becoming a practice owner. Now, I'm a firm believer in practice ownership and entrepreneurship. We encourage all of our doctors to go into that role because I think, to get to financial independence and do all the things that they need to do, it's one of the best paths. What are some examples that you have seen where somebody has taken too long to go down that road? And what do people need to think about as they're making the decision process to become an owner? Because for some people, it's the right decision. For some people, it may not be, but walk me through that a little bit.
So I agree with you. I think there's a season and a time for everything. And it's not, I don't believe somebody should or should not be a practice owner. I think the question is now a good time for me to be a practice owner. One of the most frustrating scenarios that I've seen play out multiple times, and you kind of alluded to it, is where I wake up one day and I'm still an associate in a practice, and there was some thought in my head that I'm going to take ownership,
right?
And I just never acted on it, and here I am 15, 20 years later,
right?
Feeling behind the curve, and what's really sad is when that individual didn't take the time to really understand the finances of the business either, and their thought of where things are at and where things are at are so far removed that it ends up being a negative situation, and you just have to start at a different place. So I think that for practice owners, you should always have the mentality of like, how do I have my business ready to sell tomorrow?
Right.
Because you never know what the opportunities are, and that's also how you maximize cash flow and just make sure you're healthy. If I'm ready to always sell tomorrow. As an associate, I would always try to have the mentality of what if I want to buy within the next year, or if I want to buy within the next 2 years, and because then it just is that other additional question mark on what you're going to do with your personal finances and your family finances and whatnot, right? It's always that question there, and it doesn't mean you have to. It just adds the question to it. I think a deep dive into yourself, right? Am I ready to take on the certain responsibilities, or am I able to bring on the right people around me that they can handle the responsibilities that I don't want to handle?
Right, right.
I also think you need to ask the question, do I want to own a really cool job? Because some practice owners really aren't owning a business, they own a job.
Right, right.
And that's fine. There's some really good jobs that people own. Or do I want to own a business, because that is wearing a different hat, a different set of structures. And my dad and I were great examples. He loved being the face of the business. He wanted patients to come see him. He owned a wonderful job, if you will, that served my family very well. We had a great life as kids growing up. I like the ownership of a business mentality more. And so I'm very rarely in the clinic because I'm spending most of my time when I am with the business working on the business side of it as a CEO and an owner, not a doctor within the clinic. So I think just learning yourself is important too.
Yeah. How do you keep your laptop dry when you're surfing and working on the business? Just kidding. All right.
I enjoy that's the one time I enjoy when nobody can call, text, or email me. It's amazing.
No, I'm just joking. Yeah. Well, let's transition to that actually, because optometry is a very female-centric profession. There's more female optometrists coming out of school every year now, and I think it's been that way for the last like 12 years, if not more. But a lot of times they struggle, with balancing being a mom, a business owner, a spouse, right? And so, how have you been able to manage that, in your role, because you do all three of those things really well, and to walk us through that a little bit. Like how is that a valid stress? Is it overblown? Like how do you work through that?
No, that's a good question, and I can only answer it for address it for myself. But the first thing I'll say is some of my colleagues that are moms, and I know one friend of mine who opened a new practice or bought a practice every time she was pregnant.
Yeah.
I don't know how she does what she does.
Yeah.
She's insane. Her husband is in the Navy, and he was gone a bunch too. So
I love that.
And moms just have a different sense of nurturing, caring that dads don't quite have. I mean, I'm loving, I'm caring, but I don't wake up in the middle of the night panicked about my kids like my wife does. So I think that plays to their strengths too as doctors and practice owners. I think that they have a nurturing element that can't be taught to me. And I believe that diversity from a sense of I'm bringing different backgrounds and skill sets to the table really is what helps to deliver the good quality care, right? It's not, at least for me, it's not exactly what the picture looks like, but it's what the individuals bring to the table, and how we can relate to our patients, how we can connect with them. I've got 4 docs in the clinic, and we all have different ways of managing patients, and so we try to find the right patient to the right doctor. I think the idea of work-life balance has changed a lot in the last couple of years. I don't know what the right answer is, but I appreciate that the conversation's happening more. As a practice owner, sometimes I get a little frustrated with when my staff brings, hey, I don't have the right balance and I need this and that. And, you're not giving me enough spa days. But which is none, but I do think that it's a neat conversation to have, especially as connected as we are, because our personal lives and our work lives are no longer as separate as they used to be. You're not, lawyer Ali in one situation and regular Ali in the other. You're Ali. And I'm Aaron. So I try to,
or AA Ron, right?
Or AA Ron, right?
Yeah.
Or I misspelled my name, and so lately it's been Asron because the S is right next to the A on the keyboard. That was, I think it's knowing when to dial up and dial down.
Yeah.
Your responsibilities, and I think that being good in one area helps you be good in another area, right? Being a good mom or being a good dad helps you empathize with your patients and be a good patient. Knowing that I've got to get out of here by a certain time because I got to pick them up or take my kids to sports means I need to learn how to be efficient. Yeah. So I think that there's lots of skill sets that translate better than I think we thought they did, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good description of it. And I think it's a superpower too, like you were saying, for a lot of moms. I think society puts that stress on them that you can't do all of them, but it's a superpower. My wife, as you know, is a clinician, and she always says, that in her, peds practice, that she feels like she became a better clinician after having kids than before, because she saw a aspect of her work that she didn't appreciate as much when she wasn't a mom, right? Because when you're a mom, it's just different, right? Like you just you sense things like you said that you and I could never sense, and so what I have seen, at least in our practice, is especially if you're having, like if you're doing your practice, either a startup or an acquisition early in your family cycle, right? You may, be just having kids or you just had. I feel like that's the best time, even though it's hard because you're not sleeping much and there are babies and all this. It actually, they're not mobile. They don't have as many sports activities and this and that, and so you can actually build your business, at that point in your life, even though it's really kind of crazy. So it seems like you have the same experience. So.
Oh, for sure. And you're younger. I mean, the older I get, the more I need sleep, and the more coffee I need just to hit the same level. So
yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into some questions we got from our audience for you. So it says, Ali, I've been an associate for a while now. My hours are good, and I don't have to deal with the stress of running a business, and I make a solid living. Sure, ownership might mean more money, but honestly, I feel content where I am. Why should I even bother taking on the headache of practice ownership? Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah.
That is a good question. So my first question back is really, what does comfort mean to you? Because I like to be challenged. I think we all like to be challenged. And what are your goals, and what's going to get you to your goals? I think I think comfort can hold us back, and that's the difference between good to great.
Yeah.
But what we don't know on this individual is what else is going on in their life. Maybe they're financially stable with the others, and they spend a lot of time volunteering, or maybe with their church and giving back and finding fulfillment in life in other ways.
Yeah.
But that would be my question, is just, you started off with comfort. And so that's a word that always raises a little bit of an intriguing, flag for me to investigate.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. And like, I think you said it earlier, which I think was a really important point for everyone who's listening. I think it's about introspection, right? Mm-hmm. Like what, looking into who you are, what you value, where you are in life, and how does that translate into your goals? Because the worst thing is turning around one day and saying, oh, I wish I had done this, or I wish I had done that. And, we all have regrets and different things that we do, but we wish we had done differently in our younger selves. But if you could start thinking about that now, you're less likely to be in that position in the future, right? And so,
absolutely.
Okay.
The other thing I would say to this, Doc, is because they said they didn't know if they wanted the headache. How much have you looked at it? Have you sat with the owner of the practice and looked at the books with them and gone through the books? Because you may look at it as I did, because I thought I was going to see patients 5 days a week for the rest of my career.
Right.
I realized I love the business side significantly more, and I feel more challenged in that regards. And so you don't know what you don't know. So maybe just explore a little bit before you close the door without stepping through it, or at least taking a peek.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what's funny about what you just said, I find that, that is something that we see so much of, where, when people get past the fear of, are patients going to walk through the door? And then when they do walk through the door, are they just going to take my prescription and go through, walk out and go somewhere else? Or are they going to, buy something from me? Once they get past that, then, it becomes, it's almost like they're at peace and they can really focus on the business. And that tends to be more challenging than the medical side of it, right? The clinical side, it's like, well, everyone's well trained. Everyone goes to the best schools. Their technologies are all there. So yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so this next question actually is a good one for that conversation that we just had with the first question, which is, it says, Ali, I own a small practice, and the hardest part isn't the patients, it's managing the staff. Finding good people, keeping them motivated, and dealing with the drama wears me out. How do other practice owners handle this side of things without burning out? And Aaron, what I'd like you to talk about when answering this question is not just the HR human side of things, but also how being part of a group, a study club like Vision Source, and and there's a lot of different ones out there that are kind of similar in various ways. But how being part of a group like that can help kind of navigate these kinds of issues as well. So can you touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So so the first thing I would say is that the HR aspect of it is an important piece, but in my mind one of the smallest pieces of it. And it really starts with knowing who you are as an owner. What is your values? Mm-hmm. Because when you have your values, when you have a good sense of your identity, it's really easy to measure everything against that. And when you don't, it feels like you're in one of those wave pools that's just kind of bouncing up and down, and you feel like you don't have control. So I would start there first. And for me, how I figured out who I was really Mike Matheny, he wrote a book on the Matheny Manifesto. He talks about putting a board together, and I like the way he put it. He has his own executive board of friends and people he respects that are going to challenge him. And but I kind of had that through Vision Source. I found the right docs that I respected, that were successful, and went to them and said, hey, I'm struggling. Here's where I'm at. And I found people who didn't give me an answer, but asked me a question.
Right.
And the more they asked questions, the more I was able to answer them for myself. And I needed to learn through their experiences. I needed them to help me through my experiences, help me understand that at some point you make a decision and you run with it. But as you learn who you are, then it's easier to be a leader because you're not questioning yourself and your values. When I was not quite sure who I was, and I tried to be all things to all people, is when I realized I was nothing to everyone. Yeah. And so I think that the value of community is around, because you can't be an expert in everything. You can't. It's really hard to challenge yourself. You need somebody else to challenge you. You need somebody to tell you you're being an idiot when you're being an idiot. Right. And somebody that you can call up and just say, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's the situation. Help me walk through it. And sometimes just that conversation minimizes a lot of what it is. I have that in my wife at home, if I can come home and have that conversation. So she really helps to put things for me in perspective. And I'd like to think that, every once in a while I do the same for her. Yeah. But having that community around you is important, and having that community for your people. My office manager needs that type of community as well. My technicians need that type of community, so that they can get validation, they can ask questions. Because even though we own our practice, it's much bigger than the four walls that we're in, and being able to have that community, that trusted sense of people who are like us, who are in the same boat as us, can really help us just become better in who we are.
Yeah, and that's such a great perspective. And Vision Source to me was really the first community that really grew out of a really strong base of optometrists, right? And today, we see, of course, a lot of these social communities online, and whether it's ODs on finance or ODs on Facebook or ODs on this or ODs on, there's like 1,000 of them. But to your point, the idea is the same, right? It's a community of people who interact and converse and learn from each other. And when somebody calls Vision Source, for example, just a buying group, I go, no, you're missing the whole thing. It's like saying Costco is just sells hot dogs. It's like that's not what they're about, right? It's a whole community. It's group learning. It's like a group think, it's education from that side. Yes, there's absolutely best pricing and all those kinds of things as well that comes with a community, because that's the power of being part of a community, right? But that learning opportunity, I think, is so valuable, right? It's such a valuable part of it. And I think that's why the transitions of doctors who sometimes go generations, and it's not a family situation like yours, but the seller was Vision Source and the buyer comes in and they sign up and so on and so forth, is a testament to that program, so, and the community.
Well, absolutely. What I love about this community, and you see the same thing in religious communities, you see the same thing in CrossFit communities. Yeah. It asks something of you. You can't show up and be a passive member. Yeah. And so it's like comparing a LA Fitness to your local CrossFit gym, right? They're not even close to each other. And there's a place for everybody has a place. I'm not saying that one's necessarily better, but I think if you want to grow, you want to do things, you need to find a place that asks something of you, that asks you to be an active participant, not just a passive participant. And that means change. That means being challenged. That means being vulnerable. It also means helping somebody else when they're looking for support as well. And of all those groups you had mentioned before, I think Vision Source really has done a good job over the last 35 years of still staying true to its, we're asking people to get together. Some, we'll use corporate phrases like lock arms and we're together. Right. But even there's a visual of doing something. And I think if you're looking for a group, certainly I would be an advocate for Vision Source, but I'm even more of an advocate for being part of a group, and find one that asks something of you, because you can't get better if you're not challenged.
Yeah. And I think having a group that is led by optometrists is also very important, because there's a unique aspect of that you don't necessarily get when you're not in the trenches, right? If you will. But another thing that I do want to caution, I think, the audience on too, and this applies, I think, in life, but especially in our businesses, which is you don't want to just ask one person's opinion about certain things, right? You want to get as much information as possible. And some of these online groups, sometimes we see things that we try to respond really quickly. As Kunal and our team is like a king when it comes to, trying to respond quickly to things online. And we try to get as much feedback out there, because sometimes doctors say things that they believe in their hearts is true and accurate because maybe they did it, but like you said, they're not asking the questions, and so they're giving actually terrible advice. And I have a situation right now where a doctor, and I won't say what type of doctor, because they might find out who it is, but they were basically on one of these sites. Asked the question about whether they should form an entity or not form an entity, and so on and so forth. And somebody said, you should form this sort of entity. And in the state that the original doctor is in, that entity is not allowed.
Yep.
Right? Is not allowed. And that, like, the person who answered that question meant well, right? Yep. But it just was wrong. And so our team jumped on and answered and said, no, that's not allowed, and so on and so forth. And thankfully the person saw the message and reached out, and we were able to avoid any big problems. But this kind of thing can happen, right? So it's good to ask, I think, multiple people and take all of that feedback. So.
100%. I mean, hell, that's in California, right? I can't be an LLC. And in optometry in California, I think that finding that there's lots of good intentions. I think there's very few malintended people in all of healthcare. I think there's lots of good intended, maybe poorly informed folks. And so I alluded to it earlier, building that team around you of professionals, because I'm a professional as a doctor. I'm not a professional lawyer, right? I know enough to get me in trouble.
Sure, yeah.
I know even more to say, go talk to Ali. Right? That's my get out of jail card. And it makes me look good because I know you're going to give them the right answer.
Yeah, no, great. Okay, well, Aaron, thank you for that. That's been a ton of really great insight, but it's time to turn up the heat. All right. Uh-oh. And so we're gonna ask you a question that is supposed to be controversial, and you can either plead the fifth and not answer it, or you can answer the question. And of course, you have to answer the question, because nobody has pled the fifth yet. So don't be the first, okay? If you are, I'm going to start calling you Aaron for real. Okay, so all right. So here's the question. So the question is, some doctors say that groups like Vision Source push too many vendor partnerships and end up telling ODs how to run their practices, similar to private equity. Okay. How do you respond to that criticism, and how do you how do you respond to that criticism regarding keeping the independence of the private OD offices?
Yep, absolutely. And now I see why you wouldn't give me the questions ahead of time.
That's right.
So, yeah. No, great question. In school we were taught 1 + 1 = 2. Right? It was a simple math equation that they could test us on, even all the way through optometry school. It was very clear. Here's the condition. Here's the situation. What do you do to treat? Right? It's maybe 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, but it was still a mathematical equation. And life isn't quite as simple. We can't take care of patients without the services and tools that vendors provide. They can't provide those tools without people consuming their products because they need money for R&D. I'm a firm believer on choice, but I also believe that in any environment you have to whittle down your choices and build the best team around you. And so what Vision Source does, and I'm part of the vendor team at Vision Source, what we do is we do our best to vet products, which quite frankly is challenging because when things are brand new to market, you don't want to be behind the scenes.
Right.
You want to be an early adopter and really find out what's a solution to a problem and not a solution looking for a problem.
Right.
We try to find multiple options within a category. That way, when clinically equivalent, we encourage doctors to choose the best option clinically equivalent. But we think that there's also some really good business sense and best practices as well. So I'll take contact lenses as an example. There's 4 major contact lens companies in eye care. And if you were to spread your business as a clinician evenly amongst all 4, I joke that it's kind of like dating 4 girls at once, which was fun in college, right? But you really had no loyalty between any of them. It was hard to get best pricing. And so I either had to charge my patients more or my margins as a business person were less and I was less profitable by doing so. It also adds confusion to both patient and staff because when somebody walks in, they don't know what I'm going to put them in. They don't know what brand I'm going to put them in. Whereas if I can whittle that down to a 2-vendor strategy where I work primarily with 1 or 2 vendors, it streamlines the process. Everybody's got great products. I can always go and choose a product from company D that isn't part of my initial strategy if clinically that's required. But by narrowing it down and streamlining it, one, my staff can answer questions that patients want to know. They know what we're working on. It's kind of like a mechanic who works on just European cars or just American trucks.
Totally.
Right? They know their stuff really well. And so you end up getting a better experience from that. I also can have the opportunity to buy at larger quantities for lower rates so that my margins are better. Quite frankly, it's better for the patients because I can sell them at a competitor even less than what they're seeing competitors. So patients win from this experience on it. And then Vision Source does a good job of going and negotiating deals ahead of time so that the individual practitioners, 3,000 offices, don't have to have 3,000 negotiation discussions. We have just one. So I think that choice is very important, but I also think having a strategy, both from a clinical standpoint and a business standpoint, is important. I don't want my surgeon to jump from one implant to the next implant to the next implant. I want him to be really good at the handful that he works with, and I would want my mechanic the same thing. I'd want my plumber the same thing. Know your tools well, and so that's what we encourage with our practitioners. We ask for feedback from the members. I want us to, I want them to challenge us. I want them to say, hey, look at this. Did you think about that? But it's always that game of trying to just stay ahead of the curve, keep our vendors honest, and so that they continue to deliver the best quality products and services to our members. And then, of course, encouraging the members to do their homework, right? You're ultimately taking care of the patients. Use what's clinically equivalent, but we've done our due diligence and vetting what we have. That way it becomes more efficient and easier for you and a better overall experience for you, your teams, and your patients.
Yeah, that's really well said. And one of the things that I love that you guys do at Vision Source is that practice analysis. And so for anybody who's thinking about, whether you should join or not, we've had some clients do this practice analysis where and Aaron, you can probably talk about it in much better detail than me, but you basically provide all the things that you purchase, and you provide everything data-wise to Vision Source. They do an analysis on what you're buying and what you're selling and what's moving off off the line, and then they tell you whether they have better pricing for you or not, and whether you can save, based on the breakdowns and the rebates and all of that. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. But that's a free analysis, I think you do, right?
Yep. We're happy to take a look and and do a competitive analysis. And look, the worst thing that happens is if somebody joins Vision Source that shouldn't have or hasn't done their homework yet, because now I've got somebody who's unhappy with us for at least the first 18 months when they get a chance to opt out, and that's a negative experience for everybody. Nobody wants that. So I prefer when somebody takes the time, does their due diligence, really explores, kicks the tires, take it for a test drive, because then you come in knowing what you're getting, knowing what the opportunities are, and it becomes a very positive experience for all involved.
Yeah, I remember this doctor years ago said the quote that I'll never forget. He thanked me for, actually I had invited him to the exchange, and it was the one you guys had in Vegas. I think was it the 20-year? Was it 20-year anniversary?
I think so. That was a day.
Yeah, it was 15. I think it was 20 years. Anyways, it was there, and he came, and later he said to me, he thanked me, and he had signed up, and he said, Ali, I don't know why I wouldn't do this deal. It's basically like I'm giving them $1 and they're giving me $3 back. So I'll do it all day long. I'll do it all day long. And I was like, huh. I was thinking to myself, I don't know if that analogy makes total sense to me, but it makes, that's
he's not far off.
Yeah, it makes sense, So anyhow, well, Aaron, thank you so much for being on. Thanks for, sharing some of these tidbits. And, I think it was important for the audience to really hear, how you became successful and what you did, because you have sort of, kind of a unique process that you went through, because you've touched what a lot of people do sort of individually, but it's rare to find someone who's kind of brought it all together. So I appreciate your perspective on all of this. And we have your information and some Vision Source information in the description. So if anybody's interested in learning more about Vision Source, you can contact Aaron or go directly to the site with the links below. And if you like this episode, please like and comment and subscribe to Ali Off the Record. But Aaron, thank you for being on. And
if I can say one more thing quick,
please,
Ali, I need to thank you, because you've been a critical part of our practices continuing to be in the hands of independent ownership.
Thank you.
In fact, so much so that you helped teach one of our courses that's put on by Vision Source, but not for Vision Source. It's open to all. Our Preparing to Buy Sell course, which really helps to take that the unknown away from what does that transaction look like? What does it look like to sell an office, or what does it look like to buy an office? So between you, Dr. Mick Kling, and Dale Fisher from Bank of America, you hear from people who've done it. You hear from the guy who's writing the contract and the terms and the tax implications, and then the guy who's giving you the money to make sure it happens. So if you don't mind, I'll send you we've got another one of those upcoming in October, and free to attend, because we believe that the best place to deliver care and to build wealth is through independent practice ownership. And it takes a village. Like I just said, we've got 3 entities coming together just with the goal of nothing else but to educate and drive awareness.
Yeah. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. And for those of you who are interested in attending, it's how to buy, how to sell, how to kind of basically start your entrepreneurial journey. And it's in Houston, northern Houston, like 15 minutes from the airport. So super easy to get to, and the hotel is literally a driveway away from the center. So if you're worried about Houston heat or Houston cold or Houston floods or Houston whatever, don't worry about it. You just have to walk across a little driveway and you're there. And so I always enjoy coming, and that's a great event. So we'll put the link for that too. Actually, Aaron, that's great. All right, Aaron, thank you so much, and we'll see you around. Thanks, everyone.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ali.